All right, everyone, we're going to get started. So I think you all read about Rose's background a little bit, but she's somebody who's been a really great educational resource for me in learning about homelessness in San Francisco, something that we're all affected by. And she has a really cool background in data science and a variety of other things. But without further ado, I'll let Rose kick it off. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here. So like you guys probably already know, I'm the founder and CEO of HandUp. HandUp lets you donate money to homeless people, people living in poverty, and the nonprofits that support them. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how we got HandUp off the ground, what we've been up to, what we've learned about homelessness, and share a few ways that you can help. So starting with how I got the idea for HandUp is about 3 years ago, and like everyone here walking down the streets, I was seeing homeless people passing by them and just feeling like, I really wanted to do something to help. And one night in particular, I saw a woman sleeping in the cold on the ground, and I just thought, there must be an easier, more direct way to help people, especially with all these smartphones. We can so easily, get an Uber. Why can't we help people in need? So, having some text sizing issues here. Anyway, so there are about 3.5 million Americans who are experiencing homelessness and 50 million who are living in poverty. So, it's a much bigger problem than just what you see on the streets. And so I decided that I was going to do one thing to help. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I started talking to friends and had this idea: what if we could donate to homeless people through our phones? And he said, let's do it. And so we started a side project called HandUp. I made this was like our very first website and free software that looked terrible. I'm not a web designer, obviously. He made our first donation app, a Twilio and Stripe app that he made in a weekend. And I just started talking to homeless people and getting them signed up. We had an amazing moment when we added a donate button and built a new site in Bootstrap. And then one day we got a designer. And this was actually, we got this version of the site up the night before I went on This Week in Startup, which is a startup show that Jason Calacanis does. And after grilling me for an hour, Jason says, you know what, this is kind of crazy, but I believe in you, and I'm going to be your first investor, and I'm going to help you raise a round and get HandUp off the ground. So that was a pretty amazing moment for us. Continue to iterate, and this is our current homepage. So over the last 2 years, we've partnered with now 21 nonprofits, mostly in San Francisco, but also Detroit, Salt Lake City, and we've helped 1,600 homeless and at-risk individuals, and we've now raised over $1 million through our platform, which is very exciting. So I want to share a few things that we've learned, and we've learned so much, but there are a few donor motivations we've learned that I thought you guys would actually benefit from working on Bitcoin, because I feel like there's so many parallels. You think about why people want to donate or why people want to use Bitcoin. What we've learned is the most important thing is the relationship. It's either a relationship to the person or it's a relationship to the person who's asking you to do something. The next big motivation, and these are also from Kickstarter and Indiegogo, is to be part of something bigger. People want to feel like they're part of a movement, even if the details of that movement aren't necessarily something they know very much about. So everybody here knows about the Ice Bucket Challenge and ALS. How many people know what ALS is? But it was an exciting cause that inspired millions of people to participate. And then people want to participate in causes that they are very passionate about. And lastly, incentives are hugely rewarding. So I'm going to share one story from a member that we had on HandUp, and his name is Marvin. So Marvin was homeless on the streets. He was a chess master. So he would run these chess games along Market Street that got shut down about 2 years ago. And there was an article in the Chronicle about him and about the games being shut down and about his life. And it just so happened to be the same time his high school class was having their 40th anniversary reunion. And they saw this in the paper and they said, let's do something. Like, this person was our friend. Let's help him. And they went to the city, and the city said, hey, we don't have a way of accepting donations for him, but you should talk to HandUp. And so we got Marvin signed up, and his high school class raised over $5,000 for him in the first week and helped him get into temporary housing and then permanent housing. So he is now in permanent housing after he had been homeless on the streets for 25 years. This is an example of what his page would look like. Members on HandUp, they have a profile. You can read their story. You can donate to them. You can send messages to them. So when they get a notification of the donation, they can see your words of support, and you can donate. This is actually a picture of me and Marvin at our holiday party at Twitter. And he was really excited to tell me that he just got a job. And, it took him about a year and a half of being housed and then working contract. And now he has a permanent job as a desk clerk at a human service agency. So really happy and proud to see that happen. Okay, so want to share a little bit more about homelessness in general beyond our work. And a question that I get very often is, why are so many people homeless in San Francisco? So I want to go into that just a little bit. One of the first things I learned is homelessness is not one thing. We think of it as one thing. It is very broad. It is very diverse. And it doesn't look like what you might expect. This slide has a lot of text, but most people who are homeless are actually just transitionally homeless for a short amount of time, about 80%. What most people recognize as homeless is just 10% chronically homeless, visibly homeless with severe mental health issues or perhaps substance abuse issues. And so, yeah, this is one thing to keep in mind when, the folks that you might be seeing on the streets, maybe chronically homeless. There are a lot of people that you would just walk right past and not know that they're homeless. I just heard a story of a mom and her 13-year-old who were sleeping in their Mini Cooper. They're homeless. Here's a very short story from one of the members on HandUp. I'm a single father and a melanoma cancer survivor. Unfortunately, I lost my job due to increasingly severe health issues and became homeless. The Wheeler family. Our family went from owning a lucrative business with a nice amount of savings to being homeless within 3 years. This is Rodney. He says, I have a disability, I'm paraplegic, and I'm homeless and currently living in a shelter. Rodney is a wheelchair dancer, and he was actually working at a dance company in Oakland when he got laid off and became homeless. And he raised money on HandUp to get back home to New Zealand, where he could live with his family. So in San Francisco, there were about 7,000 homeless people on any given night. This includes people in shelters, people on the streets, people in cars. About 71% of them were living in San Francisco at the time they became homeless. This is another big myth that we hear, is all these people are coming to San Francisco because we have such amazing services. Does not appear to be true. About half of them had been living in the city for more than 10 years. So one of the really good resources on homelessness is called the point in time count. There is not really a super great data set out there, but every year or so, Folks go out in the streets, do a count, get shelter data for that night, and also do a survey. So I wanted to just share a few bits from this research. So this is looking at districts in San Francisco, and if you can see, District 6 sticks way out with over 4,000 people experiencing homelessness in that district. District 6 is Soma and the Tenderloin, where we are. That's where homelessness is highly concentrated in the city. So this question was about where people sleep at night, their current living arrangements, and also a trend, so 2011, 2013, 2015. So the first grouping in shelter, 39%, outdoors, streets, parks, 46%, structure, indoor area, 11%, and in their car, 10%. Also on the idea that people are on the streets because they want to be. This question was about, what the obstacle is for the individual at getting into housing. So 48% of homeless individuals in San Francisco say that the obstacle to obtaining housing is that they can't afford rent, can't pay rent. 28% no job or income. 17% no housing availability. And actually, I put this slide in here to remind me to tell you guys, on the people want to be on the streets myth, every day, every morning, there are lines for people trying to get shelter beds. So in San Francisco, there are only 1,100 shelter beds. At times, there is more. Right now, emergency winter shelter has been opened on Pier 80, but there is not space in shelter. So that's definitely an issue as well. Okay. Yeah, heavy data. I know you guys can handle some data. I wasn't going to come in here without any graphs for you. So I see a hand. Sure.
Yeah. So sorry, and this could be an insensitive question, so definitely correct any misconceptions I have. But just because people want to have a bed in a shelter for a night, for some reason that doesn't completely correlate in my mind to like the myth of like wanting to like be homeless or live on the streets. It seems like the way I've heard it told is more of like a lifestyle choice where people don't want to be beholden to a job, a mortgage, or rent. They just kind of want to like be able to float freely. Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, I think the myth that I'm talking about is that people want to be sleeping on the streets. That if they wanted to be in shelter, they could be. And, I hear that a lot. They'll say, hey, they could be in a shelter. We have shelters. They don't want to be in a shelter. But, just the fact that the shelters are full. I don't know stats on, like, you're saying lifestyle choices. I know that there's another question in the point in time count that's like, do you want to be living in housing? And I think only 4% said, I don't want to be living in housing. I want to be living on the streets. So it's very, very low.
I have a somewhat related question. On one of the graphs you showed, I think over the last 3 years, shelter occupancy went down and people living on the street went up.
Mm.
Is that correct? Do you know what constitutes or what's behind that?
I don't know exactly what's behind that. I know that the city has been struggling to be able to open more shelter. Part of that is they're having a hard time finding locations for it. And yeah, so I don't know what's driving that trend. Besides,
I guess another interesting data point would be how many people, like if it's normalized across the 3 years, or if it just means like there's way more people out there in the last year, so that most of them are on the street, perhaps.
That there are more people out there. The number has grown slightly in terms of like total number. I think it grew 3%. not very much. One thing that I do know on this is that the churn is very high. So I think since the last point in time count in 2013, the city has housed 1,600 people and has helped 1,600 other people get home through a program called Homeward Bound. Like if you have family somewhere else, they'll help send you there. So the churn is very high, but new people are becoming homeless.
Do you know then why more visibly people are in tents like the last couple of years?
More people are in tents than before.
Which seems to correlate with this data about 46% being outside. Like way more people seem to be outside.
Yeah, I don't know.
So on the slide that Rose was sharing about the districts, it feels a lot more visible in San Francisco because there's been so much more development. So a lot of places where people on the street have been living, that's shifting. It's shifting more towards downtown. It's shifting to different neighborhoods. So it does feel a lot more visible in this graph. I mean, there's more people sleeping outdoors because you can't open more shelters and we're also losing shelter space. But I think it's also tied to development in the city and where people are able to find temporary outside shelter. So,
thanks. So in response to the, like, how can I help people on the street, one new product that we launched is called HandUp gift cards. And so our donors were saying, like, hey, we like that we can donate to specific people on your site, but we want to be able to help, I want to be able to help Joe, and he's on my street corner. So we made these gift cards that you can give to a homeless individual, and then they can redeem them at a nonprofit for what they need. And then the donor will get a notification letting them know how it was used. The other function of these cards is that it helps build engagement with the agencies. So, there are issues around lack of resources, but there are also, some folks may not go in and visit their case managers as regularly and take advantage of those resources. And so these gift cards can help with that. And also we hear from a lot of donors that they have a relationship with an individual in the community and they want to help that person, but they want to make sure that their funds are going toward good use. And then just throwing in, we also heard from our donors that they don't always want to help an individual. If you don't know somebody, you want to help maybe the organization that they're connected with. So we've just launched campaigns that lets the nonprofits that serve people in poverty fundraise for their own organizations. So I wanted to share some ideas for you all if you wanted help and you weren't exactly sure how. Yeah?
So that stat was pretty crazy. I thought you showed earlier, like half of people that are homeless in San Francisco right now lived here for 10 years and are now on the streets.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any sense as to how much people, if they get in an economic state where they like can't afford San Francisco anymore, they're like slipping into that, tend to leave versus stay? And then I guess like the corollary to that would be like, as housing has become, not exponentially more expensive, but significantly more expensive over the last 5 years in San Francisco, how the rates have changed.
Yeah. So what I do know is that the city has been trying to use the Homeward Bound program to help people get other places where they may have family. I think one issue, folks, like I hear this question a lot of like, why don't we just have them go somewhere else that's cheaper? And I think that is an interesting idea that should be explored, like building more housing other places. But I think one of the problems is that folks' support networks are here. Your friends are here, your family's here, your community's here, everything you know is here. And maybe even the resources that you're, connected with, organizations, nonprofits that are helping you are here. People want to live in cities where things are accessible. I don't know if you've ever lived in the suburbs or in a rural area. It's really hard to get around. And so, I think a lot of folks want to live in a city, in an urban area. But beyond the stat on that about half of the folks that the city helps achieve housing is through Homeward Bound. I don't know about like other people who are leaving the city. One thing I know is that eviction actually does not contribute that much to homelessness. I think it's a compelling story that's like, hey, people are getting evicted and they're becoming homeless, and it certainly has happened. Like, you know, definitely there are folks who are on the street who have been evicted, but it's not the, you know, it's not a, I wouldn't say that it's a big percentage. I should have put more stats for you guys.
No, I was getting into an Uber going home from work like 3 weeks ago, and this homeless guy shouted at me, remember, you're on my turf, I'm not on yours, or something like that. So, I get the sense that there's like the strong feeling of like, this is my home, and maybe people like haven't known anything else in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to be out on the streets. So yeah, some ideas of how you guys can get involved if you want to do something. So we had our holiday party at Twitter, and we had one of our earliest members, Adam, who actually was in that slide, like the terrible website that I designed version. And he has just got into housing. And he went up there and he said, you know, I really appreciate all that you guys have done and the donations that you've given me, but really the thing that has made the biggest difference for me is just your acknowledgement. And if you're wondering what you can do to help people on the streets, like one thing is just give them acknowledgement. Just look at them, say hello. Actually, a few ideas here. You can smile at somebody, you can say good morning. If you're chatting with somebody, if you buy a street sheet, that's a really good way to talk to somebody. You can ask, hey, is there anything I can do to help you right now? Can I buy you a coffee? Not everybody is going to want to talk to you. Not everybody is going to want your help. If you're interested in engaging with the homeless community, the street sheet vendors are very friendly, very easy to talk to, and a very quick interaction you can have to chat with somebody. This is actually in the picture Marissa, who's a case manager at a nonprofit, but she also does UX research for us, the community. You can volunteer. There are a lot of really great volunteer programs. One is Project Homeless Connect. They're the organization that we started working with. Every 3 months, they do a big event at Bill Graham Civic Auditorium where they fill it with all the service providers in one place. So DMV comes, housing, employment, doctors, dentists. Sprint brings a bunch of cell phones that people can use to make phone calls. The food bank comes. It's a very, very inspiring event. Sometimes the mayor comes and will like help in this foot wash station. I mean, it's kind of a very interesting, amazing experience. Glide is pretty close to here in St. Anthony's. They also have really great volunteer programs. You can just go for a couple hours and help serve food. Of course, you can give. Some of the organizations we love, there's so many great organizations in the city. Lava May, I don't know if you guys heard of them. We started around the same time that they did. They take old muni buses and turn them into shower and toilet trucks, so people can have a place to take a shower. Kiva Zip, they do loans. They do small loans to folks who aren't like quite the demographic that we work with, but folks who are really struggling or they have a small business. If you're more interested in the like economic empowerment side, Larkin Strait's a really great youth organization. Just so many. And before we go into questions, I wanted to offer another way that you guys could help by donating to a HandUp member. And kind of a crazy story. That actually, as I was going through the members, I saw somebody that I knew. And it was somebody who had been a TaskRabbit for me. She had cleaned my home a few times. And one day she told me like, hey, I'm not going to be able to come because I just got injured. And so, yeah, just yesterday I was looking through HandUp and I saw her on here. She was living in an SRO. It's a small, like pretty much like a single resident occupancy hotel, and she's raising $1,000 so she can stay in her housing while she recovers from her injury. So I wanted to invite you guys, if you want to help out and try HandUp, you can make a donation to her at handup.org/members/Sarah7 if somebody wants to put it in your Slack channel. Also, something about HandUp is we do accept Bitcoin. You know, there was Bitcoin in there somewhere. Yeah, so when we use Stripe, and when we heard that, I guess I'm not logged in on here, but when we heard that Stripe was doing the beta with you guys, we were like, please get us hooked up on that. So I think we were one of the first on the beta with Stripe. So the funny thing is that we accept Bitcoin and we do not accept PayPal. You know, maybe one day we'll switch to Braintree, but at this point, we're pretty happy. So yeah, if you guys have a few Bitcoin to spare and you want to help Sarah so she can stay in housing and not get evicted, that would be awesome. And I'm sure you guys have a lot more questions, so I'm happy to take any question. You know, this topic is a sensitive topic, but people have a lot of questions. I'm open to hearing any questions you have. So, you know, feel comfortable. I may not have the answer. I don't know everything there is to know on this, but, you know, feel free to fire away. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how you built the back end of HandUp, like how you decided to transfer funds and how the organizations that you work with transfer funds and how all of that works?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we were so lean starting HandUp. Actually, Eric Reese is one of our investors, which is very, very fitting because, you know, we built HandUp in a weekend with our just Twilio and Stripe text messaging app, and that was it. And now what we have is a whole back end for the nonprofit. So what you see on the front end of HandUp is like, you know, it's like Kickstarter or like any standard crowdfunding site, but on the back end, the nonprofit can log in, they can see their different campaigns or their clients who have specific goals that they're fundraising for on HandUp, and they use that to track every transaction. So one of our company values is transparency, and you know, we make sure that every cent that goes through HandUp is accounted for, and that also helps the nonprofits. The level of flexibility that we offer them is something that they've never experienced before. So they can empower their case manager to say, like, I mean, we hear this stuff all the time. Like, somebody came in, they're homeless, they just got a job, and they can't get there because they don't have a bus pass. And with HandUp, that case manager can say, like, hey, we're going to pull money out of the HandUp fund and get you that bus pass right now so you can get to work, and just track it in our system. It also lets the staff update the donors, so you can follow along. And if they have, so like Sarah, I think she's been writing back to everybody. So if you donate to Sarah, she'll probably write you back. Members on HandUp get a text message when they get a donation, and then also if they don't have a phone, they get an email. Most have phone or email access. The funds, though, go to the nonprofit. And so, you know, Sarah would need to talk with her social worker to have them, you know, write the check or make the payment for her. And in that way, we empower the individual, but we also make sure that the money is being all accounted for. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
What are the historic reasons for such severe homelessness in District 6?
So one reason that I know is that there are certain laws zoning laws around SROs in the Tenderloin, that those buildings cannot be converted to other types of housing, for example, to be bought out and turned into something else. So there is a concentration in in the Tenderloin and the general area of, really low income housing units, and also a lot of social service organizations there. That's the one thing that I know. I mean, the other thing is kind of trends of, if you remember from history class, like the white flight, in the 50s and 60s, people moving into suburbs, and then now what we're having is the strongest period of urbanization in human history. People want to live in cities. They're coming into cities. It's not just San Francisco, it's cities all over the world. And different cities respond to that in different ways. In San Francisco, we have not continued to build housing. So the demand has gone up and our housing stock hasn't. And so that pressure, contributes to displacement and lack of affordable housing. Brian.
What are some of the approaches people have taken over, maybe the last 10 years or something to try to solve homelessness in San Francisco? And then, which ones have worked and which ones haven't, and which ones do you think should be tried?
Yeah. So I guess one of the strongest ones is Gavin Newsom launched a 10-year plan to end homelessness in San Francisco 10 years ago. And they were able to reduce homelessness by 28%. So they did make a significant dent, but, came nowhere near to actually solving it. And, one effort that I see being successful in other cities is called Housing First. And I don't know if any of you saw the Stephen Colbert episode with, I think it was the mayor of Salt Lake City. It was really funny. Basically what they did is give people housing. And when you give people housing, all their health outcomes improve and the cost to the city actually goes down. In San Francisco, housing is very expensive, so that's not very practical. There's another approach called rapid rehousing that helps people who need the housing most get it first, and very, very quickly, so that they don't fall into more and more homelessness and more debt and more traffic tickets, and then your car gets impounded. So kind of stops things from spiraling out. That's probably been one of the biggest efforts. I think, one thing that I always try to encourage more of is we need new approaches. We need new people working on this. I've only been working in this space for 2.5 years, and, I only feel like I've made a tiny, tiny little dent, but this world is very welcoming of new ideas. They want help. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And I think coming in and trying to learn more and see where you can help is a very good perspective. I think from the outside, it's why don't we just, get a building? Or it seems like it should be so easy to solve. There are only 3,000 people on the streets. 3,000 people, can't we figure that out? But I think when you dive into it, it's well, we've housed half that in the last couple of years, and now more folks are on the streets. One other thing that I have to mention in response to that is modern day homelessness didn't start until the 80s. And people, credit that to, Reagan shutting down mental institutions, but it was more around cutting HUD funding for housing programs. And so modern day homelessness was born in the 80s, and if you look through historical archives, you can see we're gonna end this. The optimism was a lot higher because people remembered what it was like before, and now it's a lot lower because I think we're so used to it, except for visitors. Has anybody from recently moved to San Francisco? A couple of people. Most people who come to San Francisco tell me oh my God, I'm so shocked. I cannot believe this. And so, yeah. What else?
Yeah, I had a question about one of your slides, which was showing the distribution of how transient the nature of the homelessness is, and you said 80% is for a short time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, how short is that? Is this like a week, a month, 4 months?
I don't know if that was listed in that, but it's like a year or less.
Okay.
Like transitional is like a year or less generally. And so that's like, I don't know, like the family I showed you, a lot of families will like go into shelter for a short amount of time and then be able to get a job and get back on their feet. Actually, HUD is a Department of Housing and Urban Development, a government department. They would say that we actually know how to solve chronic homelessness. Permanent supporting housing, we have a solution to that. We don't really have a great solution to family homelessness. Why? Because it's not family homelessness, it's poverty. It's poverty as a bigger problem. And the problems there are like lack of accessible employment and lack of affordable housing. Those are the two main contributors to homelessness. Yeah.
So how are people mainly getting on this site at the moment, and like how do you actually get people the money?
So people get on the site through their case manager at a nonprofit. So we partner with the nonprofit, and then the social worker has clients who come in and they say like, hey, so Sarah would come in and say like, hey, I need help. I am about to be kicked out of my housing because I can't pay. Do you have any resources available? And, they go through, they have what is called a community resource directory, and try to find different services to help that person. And then HandUp is one offering that they can have.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So the money goes, if you donate to Sarah, that money goes to the community partner, Project Homeless Connect. Project Homeless Connect gets that money, then they would write the check to help Sarah stay in housing. So the money doesn't go to the individual, although the notifications do.
Got it. At like a higher level, I don't know, when I think about philanthropy, I try to think about like what is the largest lever you can have to like alleviate general problems in society like homelessness or poverty or things like that. How do you think about literally providing housing as a lever versus other things like education might be another?
Yeah. I guess what I think in terms of housing first is like housing first is like an evidence-based approach. There's a lot of data backing that. I guess if you're from a higher level just thinking of like how you can prevent future homelessness or future poverty versus how do we deal with the 3.5 million people who are homeless right now, like maybe those are two different questions. But like the philosophy in the homeless services community is shifting like right now. And that's from the last 15 years of research. And previously the approach was like, hey, you have to get somebody housing ready, you have to have them go through all these programs, and then you can help get them into housing. Now we know like all those programs and services are not as effective as just like helping somebody get into housing. So that is a more data-driven approach, I guess you can say. Yeah.
What's it like running a nonprofit company? How do you get investors? How do you encourage like employees to work for you? Like, I noticed on your checkout page it was like optionally include like $5 to support HandUp. Like, how do you encourage people to actually like pay you as the company so you can keep doing these things?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that. So what is it like to run a nonprofit? I don't know, because HandUp is not a nonprofit. We're a new kind of entity called a public benefit corporation. So we are a for-profit, but we have a legally integrated social mission, which is to help people in need. So this new entity has now passed in 29 states, and we actually waited to incorporate until it passed in Delaware in 2013. And the reason why is like a few things. One, I think, especially when you're building technology, if you can take a market-based approach, I think that approach can be stronger, quicker, and more impactful. Also, we're a third-party technology provider. We don't do direct services, so it's like not as easy for a nonprofit entity to get off the ground. But how is it running a company with a social mission? It's awesome. It's how do I get people to work for me? I mean, we get like so many people want to work for us, and so many companies want to help us. Like, I don't know, sorry, that's like too not humble enough, but yeah, I feel like people want to work for something that they believe in. I mean, I think you guys are probably work at Coinbase because you believe in Bitcoin, and you believe that, we should, try new approaches to finance and currency, and you're motivated by that. And, I think like right now we're seeing a lot of people, especially in the tech community, saying like, hey, I want to use my skills, but I also want to like feel like I'm building something that's making a positive impact. And then in terms of the how do we make money, so the opt-in is the support fee on our profiles product is optional, but like 90% of people opt in. So it turns into about an 8% transaction fee. So we get to give our donors that choice while also still having a transaction fee coming in. Yeah?
It seems like some of the approaches to homelessness are controversial. There's all these like, mean blog posts or whatever that happen. But does anybody think you guys are controversial and they're like really mad at you? This is one of my kind of hobbies, is to study mean people on the internet, no matter how good the thing is that you are doing.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, definitely. Yeah, HandUp.
Who hates handup.org and why?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely like had threats, and yeah, I think it comes from a few places. Like I think part of it is like comes from a really good place of people saying like, hey, I really care about homeless individuals and respecting their dignity, and what does this mean to, put homeless individuals on a website and be a for-profit company, and, like, is that exploitative? And I think that's a valid question. And of course, my answer is that I think that we have a moral obligation to make software like this. When our friends can raise money on Kickstarter for hardware projects and potato salad, I think we owe it to people in need in our community to be able to raise money for things like housing and medical care. And I also, I feel really good about the for-profit approach. I just think it creates stronger organizations. And I think that, like, why wouldn't I use that? If my goal is to have a big impact and make a big and successful organization, why wouldn't I take that approach? What else? Yeah, I mean, homelessness is controversial. It's polarizing, and I think that it's unfortunate that it's hard to talk about it, because I think this is like so many other things that are sensitive, that they're hard to talk about because yeah, I think some people are afraid that they're going to say something and be offensive. I think sometimes people say things that are offensive and there's a reaction to that. Yeah, so we've like largely gotten a positive response, like very positive. And we've won lots of awards for HandUp. We won the best charity from the Webby Awards, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, we get some questions, especially around the for-profit and the technology angle on it. But when I ask our homeless members what they think about HandUp, they say it's awesome. I'm like, what do you think when somebody thinks that, that they're not sure if like having HandUp is the right thing? They're like, tell them that they don't know what it's like to be homeless on the street.
I appreciate you showing this side of homelessness, because I think a big part of homelessness that I see, at least, or we think about, is the mental illness part of homelessness. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe the percent that, you mentioned 3,000 spending the night in San Francisco, what percent make up, what percent of that have a mental illness currently existing, or perhaps homelessness led to that, or it was previously existing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on mental illness, I only know the national stat, which I shared earlier, but would be the two smaller categories, so leading to about 20% having some kind of mental illness or substance abuse, like highly correlating with people in those categories, whereas the 80% transitionally homeless is a low correlation. Actually, one thing that Sam Dodge, who currently runs the city's like Department of Homelessness, essentially, says when people ask him like, well, what do you think about like drug use, and like drug use, leading to homelessness, he would say that actually most people who have drug addictions are not homeless. Something to keep in mind. Another anecdote I have on this, I used to do research out of a lab at SF General, and so we were doing like psych research. Had a research lab in their mental health unit, and they had a walk-in center where people could come in and get therapy, and that program ran out of funding and got shut down. That was at the time was the only walk-in mental health center. So I know that a lot of the other organizations do have mental health services as well, but it's not that easy to get access. One thing on mental health, and if you're seeing somebody who's having a mental health crisis, the police in San Francisco do go through mental health training, but the city has its own team to help in like homeless crisis situations called the HOT team. And if you see somebody who's having a crisis, or who's in the middle of the street or something like that, you can call either the HOT team, or you can call 311 and try to get connected that way instead of calling 911. Yeah.
I moved here from the UK probably about a year ago, and since moving here, I've noticed that in the UK it's much less visible as a problem than over here. I was interested if you have any facts for what's the percentage of like state and federal expenditure on homelessness and home shelters and housing benefits in the US compared to other places like Europe.
I don't. Not compared to other countries. I mean, I know the total that we spend on all, and this is like very broad poverty programs, so including Medicaid and different housing programs, is $1 trillion. Yeah, a lot of money goes into, that includes welfare, unemployment, different food stamps programs, SNAP, $1 trillion. But I don't know how that compares.
Do you think the homelessness problem is worse in the US than other places? Or do you think it's just more visible in San Francisco?
So in the city would say that it's not, that percentage of homelessness in San Francisco is not worse than other cities. It's just more visible.
Yeah.
How it compares to other countries in the world, I mean, I don't have data on that, but it from what I've heard is higher. I mean, and this is like, we had some folks visiting us from Spain, and they were only here for a week, and they were like, oh my God, so shocked. And so they went and did, as their whole class, volunteered at St. Anthony's. It's just not, it just does, homelessness like we have it here, I have not seen in any other country. Yeah.
Does San Francisco have a budget where they, I assume they have a budget where they try to help with homelessness, and you know roughly what it is?
I know that the city's portion of the funding, I know they had put in like 14 million on like to build extra housing and units, but some of it comes from the cities beyond that, some from the state and some from the federal government, some going to city programs, some going to nonprofits. I don't know the total scope of all of it. So.
Yeah. You were mentioning there was about 3,000 people living on the street in San Francisco, and I was estimating like if there was low income housing, it could be done for $20,000 a year. I don't know if that's right or not.
So actually, one thing that I do know is that we have about $27,000 per person.
Mm-hmm. Already allocated, or you're saying would be
already
necessary? Oh, okay.
Already.
Okay. I was trying to get a size of like what the total ballpark, the figure for what it would take to house all those people.
Yeah.
I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I heard this figure that for each individual housing for San Francisco costs $1,000 one person housing.
To build the unit? Yeah. Okay, I think we have 2 minutes left. Is there a last question? All right, let's give Rose a round of applause.